Okay, so today we're going to look at section 2.1, the rectangular coordinate system and graphing utilities. So hopefully this is something everybody's familiar with. You have your x-axis and your y-axis. You have your origin here at 0, 0. And then we plot points. Say we have the point 5, 3. That means positive 5 on the x-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And positive 3 on the y-axis. So that would be our point 5, 3. We could look at negative 5, 3, which would be negative 5 on the x-axis and 3. We could have negative 5, negative 3, which would be down here. And we could have 5, negative 3, which would be here. So we have a basic quadratic, or not quadratic, a basic rectangular coordinate system applied to 4 points, 4 different quadrants. So now we're going to look at, okay, let's just go ahead and pick a set of points. Say the point -1, 4, and 3, -6. So I'm at -1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3, -6. Okay, what I want to know is what is the distance from one point to the other? So we can do this. We can drop a vertical line here, and then we can draw a horizontal line here. So this point is -1 on the x-axis and -6 on the y-axis. Now, if you remember the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, in this case, the hypotenuse is what I'm looking for, c. So we'll just label this a and this b. Now, since I'm going in a straight line, my distance from this point to this point is simply a change in y of 4 minus -6, which is 10. So that's going to be my a, 10. And I'm going to want to square it. And same here. Since I'm just moving straight across, I have 3 minus -1, which is 4. And that's going to be plus 4 squared. And that's going to equal c squared. So this is 100 plus 16 equals c squared. So c is the square root of 116. Now we are dealing with differences or distances, so we don't need to be concerned with positive and negative. Everything's going to be positive because we're doing distances. Now let's look at another one here. This is going to be a little different. So I want to determine if the points x, which is the point -6, -4. Actually, let's hold off on that for a minute. Let's go to our generic graph. We have a point x1, y1, and a point x2, y2. And I want to know the distance. Again, we're going to call that c. I can drop this vertical line here and a horizontal line there. So what is this point? Well, on the x-axis, it's x1. And on the y-axis, it's y2. So this distance here, we'll call it A. A is equal to what? The difference in y. So y1 minus y2. Likewise, if we call this distance here b, b is equal to x1 minus x2. So now I want to know what c is equal to. So I know that c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. I know that a squared, or a is y1 minus y2. And then we're going to square it. And this is x1 minus x2. And we're going to square it. So no matter if we get a negative number or not, we're squaring it, so we'll be getting a positive number. So c then would be equal to the square root of y1 minus y2 squared plus x1 minus x2 squared. And we're just going to call this d for distance. Now this is the distance formula. Distance between 2 points. So now let's look at 3 points. We'll label them x, which is -6, -4. Y, 2, -2. And z, 0, 5. So drawing this, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, -4, -6, -4, 2, -2, and 0, 5. That's our point. Now what we want to know is, does this make a right triangle? So let's label our sides. We'll call this A, this one B. This looks like the longest one, so it's going to be C. So we can figure out using our distance formula. A is equal to the square root of y1, -6, minus y2, these 2 points here, -2 squared, plus, that's x. Be careful, it won't matter in the long run, but so we'll start with y1, which is -4, minus -2 squared plus -6 minus 2 squared. So A is equal to the square root 2, -4 plus 2 is -2 squared is 4. -6 minus 2 is -8 squared is 64. So A is equal to the square root of 68. We can leave it like that. We don't have to mess with it. Now let's look at B. B equals, and it is actually supposed to be x1, x2, y1, y2. Doesn't matter because we're adding. So B is x1 again. So here I am, this point here and this point here. I have x1, 2 minus 0 squared plus negative 2 minus 5 squared. 2 squared is 4. This is negative 7 squared, which is 49. So we get b is the square root of 53. Again, we don't need to worry about finding values. Okay, so now we're at C here. C is equal to the square root of x1, and we'll just stick with negative 6 minus x2, 0 squared, plus negative 4 minus 5 squared. This is equal to negative 6 squared, which is 36, plus negative 9 squared, which is 81, which gives us 117, square root of 117. Okay? So now, remember your Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. So a is the square root of 68, so a squared is 68. B is the square root of 53, so b squared is 53. C is the square root of 117, so c squared is 117. Add these together and I get 121 equals 117. So no, it is not a right triangle. Okay? So again, here it is. D equals x1 minus square root of x1 minus x2. X1 minus x2 squared plus y1 minus y2 squared. You're definitely going to want to know that formula. Okay? So now let's talk about the midpoints, and we'll just bring up this formula. The midpoint is essentially x1 plus x2 divided by 2, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. That's it. All there is to it. So, midpoint. Pick a couple points. The book says negative 1.5, negative 9, and negative 8.74. So, plug our values in. We get negative 1.5 plus negative 8.7 over 2. That's my x-coordinate. Then I have negative 9 plus 4 over 2 for my y-coordinate. So this becomes negative 10.2 over 2. And this becomes negative 5 over 2. So our midpoint is negative 5.1, negative 2.5. And that is it. So graphing an equation. So let's look at an equation. We have x squared plus y equals 4. We want to graph it. Now, the easiest way to graph these right now is to just plot some points. And the first thing to do, well, if x is 0, this is 0, so y is 4. If y is 0, x squared is 4. So x could be 2 or negative 2. And let's go ahead and put 3. Actually, let's put 1 and negative 1. If x is 1, this is 1. Subtract it, and we get 3. If x is negative 1, this is still 1. and we get 3. So we have the point 0, 4, 2, 0, negative 2, 0, 1, 3, and negative 1, 3. So we're looking at a shape something like this. And later on, you'll become quite familiar with that shape. So that's how we plot by plotting points. Okay, so we've already done this next thing here. But let's bring this up. We have the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So where does this intersect the x-axis? Well, whenever y is 0. So to find the x-intercept, let y equals 0. To find the x-intercept or the y-intercept, well, that's this point where x is 0, so we let x equals 0. So we found 2 x-intercepts and 1 y-intercept on that particular one. Always best to find the intercepts first. So let's look at y equals x squared minus 4. So let's find the x-intercept. So if y is 0, what does x? Well, x squared has to equal 4. So x is plus or minus 2. So that is my x-intercepts. 2, 0, and negative 2, 0. What about my y-intercept? I think this was the same problem. I simply let x equals 0, which gives me y equals negative 4. No, it's not the same one. So x is 0, y is negative 4. That is my intercepts. Okay, so the last thing we have on here for this section is using your calculator to graph an equation. We'll stick with something simple to start with. Let's graph y equals 2x plus 1. So here's how we do this. You hit the y equals button. Then it should be at y sub 1 equals. So then you just key in the equation. You hit 2, and there's a button. On my TI-83, it says x t theta n. That'll give you your x variable. And then just do plus 1. Then you hit your graph button. And you should get a line about like, well, I missed. About like that. And there it is. That's it. Now you also have a feature on these where you can limit the window. If you hit the window button, it should say x min equals, and for most problems, you're going to want that to be negative 10. You're going to have x max, make that 10. Then you're going to have x scale. And like I said, unless otherwise told, stick to these measurements or these numbers. Y min negative 10, x min, our X max, our Y max, 10 Y scale equals 1, and it has a Y resolution too, but I've never used that. That's what when you hit window, that's what you should have, unless otherwise told. Now you may, the skill practice problem, it says to use the following view window. It'd be, use this 6 or -6, 6, and 1 by -4, 8, and 1. What this does, this is your X min, this is your X max, this is your scale, this is your Y min, this is your Y max, and this is your scale. This is going to limit the window. The X values will only be from -6 to -4, and the Y values will be from 6 to 8. So that pretty much covers section 2.1. As always, don't hesitate to email or ask questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Have a good day.